back to what it means to be a writer. Today's episode, we're going to be discussing your first book. But first, my disclaimer. Everything that I'm about to say is based on research and my opinion. If you do not agree with what I'm about to say, that is perfectly fine with me. I will lose no sleep over it. If you think that I'm going to wake up at 3 in the morning and cry in a carton of ice cream over our intellectual dispute, you would be wrong. Because when I wake up at 3 in the morning, my husband has probably already eaten the ice cream, so I have to find something else to cry into. I digress. So, your first book. This is such an exciting topic because it means that you are taking that first step. There is no wrong way to go about it. And I know people that will spend years writing and sharpening their skills, and then they take on the task of their first book. And I also know people who just jump in with both feet, and it's like the first thing that they try to write. There really is no one right way or wrong way. It's really like what works for you and what you want to do, what's best for you, basically. Okay, here's the thing though. Your first book is going to suck. And I say that with all the love and support in my heart because I'm like, it's not about being critical or mean, but your book is going to suck. Okay, so there's a real stigma about writing your first book for new writers. And I think what originated as an older, experienced writer talking to a baby writer and then making a joke or even just fondly remembering how their first book sucked too, it's turned into something that's a little bit more negative. And this is not supposed to be negative. It's supposed to be a spoonful of realism. It's not meant to discourage you. It's just supposed to keep you grounded. So I don't say any of this to like hurt you. And it's not because you're not a good writer. You are a good writer. It's not because your idea is not good enough. Your idea is brilliant. These two things are facts. You're a good writer and your idea is brilliant. Hold on to that. And I'm not telling you that your book is bad because you're going to do a bad job, because you're going to do a really good job. So I don't want anyone to listen to this and then walk away feeling discouraged, because this is not meant to discourage you. Go out there, write your book. The reason your book is bad is because you're going to make every writing mistake known to man in your first book. It's what every single writer does, because you're learning through trial and error. You're going to make the mistake and then you're going to learn from it. Unfortunately, these are not things that you can just not do, and they're not things that you can't learn. So you have to, like, it's all trial and error. Like, you have to figure it out for yourself. And when you fail or stumble, you get to learn from that. That's what we do, is we learn from our stumbles and we learn from our failures. So I guess what I'm saying is that when you write your first book, it's not going to be the best work that you've ever written. It's going to be the first work that you've ever written. And that's okay. In fact, that's more than okay. That's fantastic, because you got out there and you wrote a book. That was the hurdle you covered when you wrote your first book. Your next book, that gets to have the challenge of being a good book. The first one is just about writing it. So a lot of the time, first books, they don't get published because we know it's not the best thing that we will ever write. And that's also fine. The first book that I wrote was in high school. It has never been published. It was super fun to write, but in the middle, I changed the plot because I was bored with the old plot. And I covered up my mistakes with random inaccurate fight scenes. I also, it was also like very mock historic fiction. And by that, I mean that like I picked it to be in the ancient Middle East, but all of my research and information came from watching Aladdin, the TV series, not the movie. Compared to my writing standards of today, it's trash. In high school, I was super proud of it because I'd never written something before. It had a beginning, a middle, of an end, and that was like the most I'd ever done, and it was great. The hard part had been writing it, and I was pleased that I'd met that goal and I had written it. And that's a win. My first published book It has a similar story. I had a horrible scene near the end of my book that involved a car accident where with the bad guy. And as a writer, I was like super dismissive about it. I was like, well, he's dead. But the characters reflected my personal feelings about the accident. And my mother and sister, they're my beta readers. They laughed about it and they still make jokes about it like to this day because it was unrealistic. I wanted to wrap up my loose ending. I didn't want to spend a lot of time writing about it. I wanted to keep my word count down. And I learned that for like a reader, that's not like you can't be lazy. Like that's not how that works. It becomes really obvious and you can see through the writer's intentions at that point. So I rewrote the scene before it was published, and that's totally fine. But that was like a failure that I got to learn from. Okay. So writing, like any other skill set, it's just as much about the journey and the practice as it is about getting to where you want to be. So you can absolutely publish your first book. Don't think that you can't. Write it, put it on a shelf, write a ton of other stuff, then go back and read your manuscript, your very first book, and fix everything that you hate about it. Then give it to your writing group and all of your beta readers. And when they give you feedback, if it's constructive and well organized, then you fix all of that. And then you start working towards getting it published. Your first book as a writer is very important. It's a physical mile marker of all of your progress, everything that you have accomplished up until this point. So don't be afraid of jumping in and writing your first book just because it's going to suck. Write it, get it out on paper. You can fix the suck later, and you will learn so much and grow so much just from doing it. Okay. So get out there, write your first book. I know that I, for one, I'm really looking forward to reading it. So get it done. All right. See you next week.